And that's where that title Unseen and Unstoppable comes from, because we just activate like, oh, okay, you think I'm this, so then I'm unstoppable. I'm gonna do all these things, but then we need to watch out because then we're trying to do too much.
I know that's where we have to talk about the balance, and I'm sure we'll get into that later.
Well, let's get into it now. So how can us Black women balance ambition with self-care and without feeling guilt or burnout?
That's a really good question. And I think what I've learned over the years is there was once that I timed in my life where I was going through a divorce. So I actually got a life coach because I just didn't know where to pick my life back up.
Yeah.
And he had me do this thing called a happiness index.
Welcome to Journey to Joy Live, a podcast to promote wellness, resilience, and inspire joy. Be empowered to balance your mental, physical, financial, aspirational, and social health while providing mental health awareness and breaking down the stigma of mental illness in the Black community. I'm your host, Dr. NJoy, and I'm here to help you transform life's challenges into opportunities for joy. Let's begin the journey together. Hello and happy new year to everyone. We are in episode 79, Unseen and Unstoppable, empowering Black women to rise above challenges with grace and resilience. And I have a special guest here today who is Dr. Sashana Gordon. She's an OB-GYN physician and new author. Woohoo! Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here tonight for us to chat.
Yes, I finally got you on here. We've been talking about this, I feel like, for a year.
It's like that, right?
Exactly. And we go way back. For those who know, I did my residency in Cincinnati. You also did your residency in Cincinnati.
That's right. Good old Cincinnati.
Exactly. Well, actually, before we even get into that, tell us more about who you are.
Okay. I'm an OBGYN here in Lawrenceville, Georgia. I've been in the OBGYN sector for about 10 years for those who are in training, some of which I had the pleasure of meeting you and working with you for some time in the NICU. So that was then. And currently, I'm also the president of Embrace Girls, Inc., which is a nonprofit that empowers young girls. And yes, like you said, I recently authored a Pap smear easy guide that is supposed to help providers to talk to patients about their Pap smears in easy ways. So yeah.
So it's for providers. Awesome.
Provider, kind of a tool just to help kind of give the information to patient in a way that's easy to understand.
That's good. Can patients also look at it for help, or it's just for the providers?
Great about it. Once the provider utilizes it to educate the patient, they give it to the patient to take home.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so it's for everybody. Nice, because we all know we need as much information as possible. There's always questions about women's health and what to look for, when to go get it, and all those things. So
absolutely. And you
great.
Can see me as the OB Genie on TikTok talking about some of these same things. So
yes, awesome. Sounds good. So thank you so much. Like I said, we've known each other back in Cincinnati. You kind of hit me there with the PTSD NICU. I don't know if I had a great experience in the NICU as someone who ended up being a psychiatrist, but I got through.
Well, that's how we're here. It's being in experiences like that that's, made us who we are and brought us to this very moment. So everything works for good in the end, I believe. So.
Yes, and full circle. I can say this, but you aren't allowed to say this, but I can say it. But you are also my OB-GYN, which is pretty dope. She almost delivered my second baby, just one day off.
I know. And that was such a pleasure. And we're so honored to have amazing patients like you choose our practice. So definitely.
Exactly. So really, we're talking about this topic because, at any rate, my audience are women. I love talking to women. I love talking to Black women. So we're talking about our mental health, our physical health. I obviously publish a journal that helps us promote mental, physical, financial, social, and aspirational health, all aspects of our health. And, we recently went through last year, the election, November, and we were just really promoting Black women win, Black women, Black women. And so we were really excited, but there was obviously this not even unseen, this obvious devastation afterwards. So we
Yeah.
talked about like let's just talk about our empowerment in general because there's certain times where we feel unseen as Black women, what we're doing and whether we're going under the radar. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah. So with that said, what are some unique mental and physical health challenges that Black women tend to face? And, how can we overcome that with resilience?
I think we laugh now when we think back about our time in Ohio, but the reality is we as women of color ended up in training programs where there weren't many of us, right?
Yeah.
In my training program in particular, I was the only Black resident there in 10 years. And initially, there was
Yeah.
nothing I thought about that. But I think that one of the key things that I always think about now, and I have words to put to it, is the first only different kind of theory that Elaine Welteroth talks about in her book,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And with that book, it really highlights what women of color go through, being
Yeah.
the person of color in a room, being the only one and seeming different. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges is that I think a lot of times people are distracted by the color
Mhm.
men, that they first thing they're thinking is this person qualified to be at this table in this room with me? I'm sure you get this a lot. Can't tell you how many times that are you the nurse? Even after
Mhm.
hey, I'm Dr. So and so. It's just, I think that's one of the challenges is that society is still trying to figure out where women of color belong and how we,
Yeah.
show up in a room. And I think that's one of the challenges. And then we overcompensate, we start to do more than probably we need to try to prove that we're good enough to be there.
Ooh, good
So it affects
point.
a lot. It goes into a lot of how we feel about ourselves and
Mm.
confident person to walk in a room, that can really be challenging to be the first, only, and different person there.
Yeah, that's so true. It's like that feeling unseen or feeling inadequate makes us try to do more or to do all and be everything to everyone. And then that's how we overcompensate. That's a good point. And I remember in medical school, I would be studying and then, oh, so you're studying to be a nurse? They like automatically assume I'm studying to be a nurse. I'm like, no, I'm in medical school studying to be a doctor. But yeah. And I remember in residency, for the ped side, there were 60 residents. So there were 9 Black females. And I remember thinking, oh, that's a lot. But
Yeah.
really, no, it wasn't a lot. But it wasn't until I moved down to Atlanta where it seemed like there were a lot more Black doctors.
Yes, absolutely. There was definitely this warm feeling that came over me when I came to Georgia. Not only were there so many doctors who looked like me, but there were also the nursing staff, the support staff, a lot of diversity in different cultures and languages. And I think that that's a really beautiful place that you can feel comfortable in. And I will say, I show up differently in this space than I
Hmm.
an atmosphere where I was the first only different.
Hmm.
But a pressure, needing to be cautious and careful and overthink things.
Hmm.
Now that I'm more comfortable in a place like being here in Georgia, I've been able to just not only show up as myself,
That's good.
but not have that mask or need to be anxious about
Hmm.
people making things up or what I mean, like the challenges that we went through. It literally just kind of fell off, and that
Yeah.
so it's definitely a challenge that we deal with as women of color.
Yeah.
Is are you supposed to be here, and that how we internalize that.
Yeah, because in some ways we feel unseen, like people aren't noticing us. But then in a lot of ways, the spotlight is on us, and people are definitely looking at us as the only Black female in the building or the only Black person in the room, and feeling like we have to live up to some societal standards that that we think that they're even thinking. They're either are thinking it or that's what we think, and it's just a lot of pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you. It's more of being seen for the wrong reasons or trying to put something on us that's not really there.
Exactly. And that affects our mental health and our physical health. It's very stressful. I loved living in Cincinnati, but definitely what you're saying, being around people that look like me, I feel a lot better. I feel less stressed. But it definitely was a lot of stress on me. And, that was one of the things I laugh about the PTSD of being in the NICU. But yeah, I was the only resident or intern that was Black, and then everybody else was white. And any mistake that I may have made, it was just like, I feel like blown out of proportion. Maybe it's a NICU, so I guess you blow anything out of proportion. That's a mistake in the NICU. But still, like you feel like they're judging you for on all levels, not just on, oh, you're an intern, so let me teach you, versus, oh, they have this preconceived notion of what they expected or stereotyped against you in the first place. So that stress leads to that mental illness that you can have.
But to really answer that question of what I would say to women in a space where they feel unseen, it's okay to be the first, only different. Show up with confidence. Continue to be bold in the space that you are. There is room for you there.
Mm-hmm.
To find mentorship so that you can know other people who've been in that space before and how they've succeeded and overcome the things that you're going through. Nothing is new under the sun. So someone else is there that you can talk to who can help you, to guide you. And I definitely had that.
Right. And that's where that title Unseen and Unstoppable comes from, because we just activate like, oh, okay, you think I'm this, so then I'm unstoppable. I'm going to do all these things. But then we need to watch out, because then we're trying to do too much.
I know. That's where we have to talk about the balance. And I'm sure we'll get into that later.
Well, let's get into it now. So how can us Black women balance ambition with self-care and without feeling guilt or burnout?
That's a really good question. And I think what I've learned over the years is there was once time in my life where I was going through a divorce. So I actually got a life coach because I just didn't know where to pick my life back up.
Yeah.
And he had me do this thing called a happiness index, where I had to determine on a rating from 1 to 5 how happy I was about like my career, my health, my relationships. And as I divulged to him my different scores in different areas, especially in the relationship category, I would talk about my ex-husband at the time and my child at the time. And he says to me, what about you? What about the relationship with you?
Oh.
Well, you was one of the most profound things to hear in my life. I never at that point thought about myself as an individual, as an entity. We go to the store, we think, oh, let me pick this up for my spouse. Let me pick this up for that person. Or I wonder if this person needs that. When do we ever pause and say, what do you need?
Yeah. What do I need?
What do I need? What do I want? What's good for me now? And I think the way that we balance that is checking in with self, caring for self. We talk about self-care and self-love a lot, but what does that mean? Sometimes it means saying no.
Boundaries.
Setting boundaries. Sometimes it means I can't today and I don't want to, and that's okay. Sometimes it means leaning into that voice that says, listen to your body. And when it says, I don't want to do anything today, and taking care of you, resting, being healthy, all of those things. But really listen to that inner voice and what you need. And ever since I've learned to tap into that, I'm able to quickly elevate my happiness index to a 5 when I need to.
Wow, that's great.
Focus on self as an important entity.
Yeah, and I imagine you might be the first line, like other primary care physicians are, when you see women come to you and they might experience stress, lack of self-care, mental illness. What kinds of medical issues are you seeing that's probably wrapped into stress, and it you end up coaching them about self-care?
Oh my gosh, the number one thing is postpartum depression. When I had my first child, I don't know about you, but when I had my first child, I was shocked when I took that baby home, and I had to breastfeed the baby, figure out what the baby needed, the little noises they made. There is so much that I think even us as OBGYNs, we have to work on, and is educating women about the postpartum period. That experience of having your first child, even the second or the third, and not sleeping, really can affect your mental health. So one of the key things that I deal with, where I have to advise self-care and take
Yeah.
self is actually postpartum, because when women are tied to that baby 24/7, it actually becomes
Oh man.
overwhelming. And so, sometimes a patient will say to me, my family, they'll come, they'll cook, they'll clean for me, but they leave me with the baby 24/7, and it's
Uh-huh.
crazy. What was your experience like?
Oh my God, exactly. So for my first baby, I mean, I was, oh gosh, tears, crying, fatigue, because I was one who needed my sleep. And that was the one thing I was afraid of would happen to baby because they wake up every 1 to 3 hours and you have to feed them. You can't just leave them there crying. But like, so that was new for me to have to just get up like that. And whether you're single or not, it's you still go through it. I
Yes.
have a husband and he was off for about, I think he took several weeks off actually. But the hormones, and I would argue with him. I'd be like, well, you get to go out the house because we got to stay in for
Yeah.
2 weeks or we can't drive, and we feel so dependent on others. So I'm just like, you get to leave the house and I can't, and he's doing all these things for me. But then I find some reason to like, lash out on him. But I remember looking up symptoms. I feel like I was in between like the baby blues and the postpartum depression because it felt hard. And with the second baby, it was this really weird feeling, of starting over. And the first baby's Legend, then it's Egypt.
Yeah.
I thought I had two Legends. It was really weird. I couldn't separate the two as being two different babies. I would look at Legend and I would look at the baby. I'm just like, but who are you? It was just so confusing the way our mind, like the mommy brain works. And I'm just like, I can't go back to that. But yeah, it was very difficult. You have to get through the routine. It gets better.
Yeah.
So I feel like I got in less arguments and less blame with my husband the second time around, and being a little bit more organized and realizing, oh, if I just swaddle the baby and play some white noise, then he goes to sleep.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Absolutely. And that's the thing too, I realize when I tell patients, what I want you to do is ask that family member who comes over to clean, can you hold the baby for 2 hours?
Yeah.
Shower, or I'm going to go for a 30-minute walk. It is amazing how that quick, small separation of time, you take a deep breath and you're like, oh, I'm a person too. I'm important too. And also in those moments, crazy as it may be, maybe go for a massage. I remember the first time I did self-care
Mhm.
when I got a facial and I cried. I know it's weird. It's crazy.
That's good.
It was the first time I ever did something so meaningless
For
to
you.
it's just for me. I
Wow.
literally cried. I'll say she's in Cincinnati, she's phenomenal, but she says, I actually get that though.
That's cool.
Shows
I
are
definitely I
but
definitely need to get more facials.
pour it into yourself. I just felt so special,
Mhm.
that no one can do for you but you. So I would say postpartum depression is one thing. Of course, going through a miscarriage is also one of the most devastating news for us to deliver as an OBGYN.
Mhm.
And something that for me as a physician, I often will have patients in both those experiencing both of those things come back to see me frequently. So I
Mhm.
can be sure I'm keeping up on where they are mentally, knowing when to refer them to a mental health specialist or whether they need to be started on medication. But those patients to me are really important to keep an eye on to make sure that they're taken care of, they're feeling
Mhm.
supported. Because sometimes patients don't feel supported by their partners, even going through those things.
Exactly. Well, I'm glad you brought up miscarriages because that's something I definitely wanted to bring up. So, Journey to Joy Live is a very transparent podcast. I can't force you to say things, but I definitely can be transparent and say that I've had two miscarriages, and one was in residency. So, it was already an unexpected pregnancy. So, there was that you go through. Then you accept the fact that you have this unexpected pregnancy. So you want to carry it through. And then I miscarried. And that was probably one of the devastations that led to me leaving the triple board program altogether because I was on peds, I was in the ER,
Mhm.
and I was just like, I can't do this. And that's when I ended up switching out and going into just psych. But the devastation. So that was 2016. And then after we got married right away, we're just like, let's try to have a kid.
Yeah.
And then we got pregnant, I think after 4 months. And then that miscarried.
Yes.
Each miscarriage was right at the 7-week mark. So then there's that trauma of getting to the 7-week mark. It just felt like an eternity to finally get pregnant again. But when I look back, and so that was November, I miscarried. And I remember being in New York airport and gave birth to the fetus, like literally had on that level, like a minor level of labor pains, and gave birth in the airport bathroom. Anyhow, that was that was a whole nother thing. I got pregnant in February after November. So when you think about it, it took less than a year, but it felt like an eternity. So let's talk about. Go ahead.
No, even I'm so sorry you went through that, because it is traumatizing. And even hearing your story, I have chills. Because this is something that we talk about with women every day. And what you tapped on when you said get into that 7-week mark again, I have had patients who've cried on my shoulders, who cry in or examination rooms because they're so scared the moment you put the ultrasound probe on to check out his heartbeat. And just the concern and the worry, and like you said, the PTSD of going through that. And, you know, one of the unique and beautiful things about our specialty is that we have to do all of the things. You know, we're the patient's counselor, we're their comforter, we're their primary care doctor. We do all of those things. And in that moment, what they need is support and empathy when they do find out that the baby doesn't have a heartbeat. And one of the things we do in our practices, we make sure to take our time with those patients. We actually schedule more time with patients for an ultrasound in case we need to talk to them about something like that.
You have to do that. And honestly, women physicians tend to have more empathy. And there was an article about that. And it was a white male physician that I remember going to see, and he had to do whatever the procedure is where they see if it's still viable or not. And he was just like, oh, it's going. Like he just no sugarcoating, no nothing. And I just bursted out crying. He was still down there looking around. I was just crying. And then I could see he was like, oops. And then he was like, well, actually, there may still be a chance. I'm like, okay, now you want to. But yeah, it's so important to have that empathy and compassion.
Absolutely. And even though I have not been through it, I experienced it almost on a daily basis.
Vicariously.
I am an empath naturally, so I feel that with whichever patient is going through it, you know. So I always say to my family when I come home, like, sometimes I need a minute, because sometimes I spend most of my days helping women through the different things that they're going through, and it is withdrawing, you know. So a challenge, because you feel it as well.
So real quick, because patients or women, they ask about this. I mean, I know it's not their fault, and we all know that, but what are the statistics behind miscarriages? Because it seems like, if you know, I don't usually know numbers, and people ask me that anyway.
No, I'm going to use
like a lot of women.
Very inaccurate statistics that's based on just my general experience.
Exactly.
Because I don't have those numbers in front of me. But you're asking like how often miscarriages happen?
Yeah, because usually women are thinking it's just them. They're thinking it's on them. It's their fault.
This might be quite inaccurate, but I would say in my experience, in my practice, oh gosh, I would say 1 in every 20. It's not very common. So that's even more common than because I would tell you, just from the patients I've seen in the last year, I've probably only diagnosed 3 miscarriages.
That's good.
It's just me. Now, if I would really put a percentage to it, I would say probably about 10% of the pregnancies to 15% can be abnormal, because it's not, for us as OBGYNs, there's more than just a miscarriage. Okay. There are pregnancies that result in like cancer. You've heard of gestational trophoblastic type of pregnancies. There's a lot that patients don't understand about pregnancy. And it's true, you're not the only one going through it. It could be a miscarriage. It could be where there's no baby in a sac. There's a lot of things that we can diagnose. What I try to tell patients, and exactly what you said, I say to them, you will see a lot of people get pregnant and all you see is their celebration and the pictures on social media. But there's a lot more complexity to pregnancy than we understand. A lot.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
No, that's really nice, is that when you do have a miscarriage, you often will go on to have a normal pregnancy. And so that's something positive that I can at least leave with women, that it doesn't define your future completely when it comes to what your family is going to look like.
Yay. Yes,
Yeah,
because that's what happened. I went on and had 2 healthy babies.
exactly. And there's so many things that go into it. Stress or health individually. There are health issues that can lead to miscarriage. And also we know that stress is a big part of it as well. So I think those are important factors to put into play as well, because you mentioned one for you was in residency. Another time it sounds like you were traveling. Not that that does anything, but I don't know if you were also interviewing for jobs, or if you felt like your life at that point was challenging. Sounds like you were about to have a residency baby. We missed out on that.
Oh, good. I mean, looking back, it's kind of good, but at the time, it's like, oh no.
Hey, girl.
Uh,
So there's a lot that goes into it. And that's why I tell patients, let's individualize your care, because we can't really say
Case
what
by
somebody's
case.
is. But
We can't.
the most common reason we do know this, though, is that the pregnancy is abnormal to begin with, and typically chromosomally abnormal.
It never was going to carry the term regardless. Exactly.
Exactly. So most miscarriages, that's the reason that it happened. So when you think about it that way, there are probably more challenges to come if that.
Exactly. All right. Well, going back to our unstoppable women, right? Whether you're seen or unseen.
You can get pregnant again, and the superpower of reproduction.
Exactly. So there's wife mom bosses, there's mom bosses, and then there's bosses. So let's start with the bosses who may have wanted to be mothers and aren't able to be mothers. Is there any advice that you give to them? There's like literally a mental mindset that a woman has to do when she realizes she's either infertile or that it's not going to happen. And then she shifts her focus on, well, let me go travel. Let me be married and the two of us go do our thing. But there's a nice, probably huge boundary between, being able to get there and pretty much grieve the fact that they aren't ever going to be a mother. Is there any advice that you usually give to those patients?
Absolutely. I actually have had a recent experience with this with a patient, but I put this in multiple ways. The first thing I always say is there's multiple ways to have a family. And the truth is, when we see families together, that could be a child that was adopted.
Yeah.
That could be a child that came from a donated egg with your husband's sperm, or the other way around, donated sperm with your egg. We see families and they look beautiful together, but we don't know how they came together. It could have been a child that you're taking care of because of, a sibling that couldn't take care of that child. So I always tell them there's multiple ways to build a family. And what I encourage women to do is not be stuck in a mindset of, I have to have my child this way.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, what I see a lot is, now that as women we're being bosses and getting out there and going after our careers, guess what happens? We're having children much later.
Exactly.
So now we come in and you're, mid 40s even, and you're like, I'm ready to have a child. And as an OBGYN, we're kind of holding our breath like, okay,
Advanced maternal age, elderly mom.
well, not even that, but do we have viable eggs that are there? So I think one of the things about being a boss, when we pursue that, and I love that we're doing that as women, is that now we're having children later. So pregnancies are more complicated, and coming with that advanced maternal age could be high blood pressure, diabetes, or other issues related to being older and being a mom. So yeah, that's what I tell patients. There are multiple ways to have a family. Or if you figured out that you're not willing to go one of those routes, like adoption or a fertility specialist, exactly the words you use, grieving that life you thought you were going to have that had your own biological child in it, and now refocusing on other aspects of your life that make you happy.
Right. And we're not just talking to heterosexual women, we're talking to cisgender women, and we're talking to women who are homosexual, lesbians, and they have babies non-traditionally as well, whether it's foster or adoption or other cases.
Exactly.
So even if you are that cisgender female who's heterosexual and married, that's how you can get your baby as well.
Some women are choosing to be single moms by choice. They're like, I'm not waiting for a partner.
That's very true. So, they freeze their eggs and they get them. Yeah, exactly.
Get them fertilized and they have their babies. So I think that we have to be realistic. You know, we have to ask ourselves, if I do want a family, it's something I need to be thinking about now. You know, and does that mean freeze my eggs, go after my career? Or does it mean have the family now and do both? You know, but it's a conversation we have to have with ourselves as well.
A lot of decisions to make because, I mean, the grass isn't always 100% green on the other
You got even more
side.
girls.
So let's get into those mom bosses because I mean it's layer after layer because even if you a single mom, I mean that's hard because maybe you don't have a partner that's helping, or maybe you're co-parenting and they're helping. But then the extra layer of wife mom boss is can be even harder. You might say, oh well, they're married, they have this, but then you have to be that person for the wife. I mean for your spouse, whoever that spouse is. So how do we navigate us bosses, whatever level would have marriage or spouse, whatever we level of life that we're in, how do we manage being everything to everyone and
Yeah.
also still being our unstoppable and doing it with grace and resilience?
You know what's so interesting is I can't tell you how many patients that are married are like, my partner doesn't help me, you know, my partner doesn't help
Oh,
me.
they feel like a single mom in marriage. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I do think, unfortunately, because of traditional societal roles, it's hard for women and men when we are even together in a family to split the work equally, right? Especially if you have a newborn and you have to be the one to breastfeed that baby. And you know what? Your husband or partner always says, baby wants you, or so and so wants you. You know, it's a nice way to hand off the child to you.
My husband always say, I don't have boobs. Here, take them.
It's like, I can milk it, give it in a bottle, and then you can keep the baby. But I think that the thing that I have learned is, first of all, I think we need to set expectations, right, with our partners. Because I don't know about you, but for me, if we're in the same space and I'm doing everything, we have a problem. You know,
Yeah.
that I personally is difficult for me. So I think it's good to set expectations with our partners of what is it that I need you to do? Because the truth is, we will be more successful as that mom boss if we have a partner that's truly executing something or doing something to help carry some of the burden and allow us that time. Another tip that I love is, I don't know if you ever heard of the book Miracle Morning, but
Mm-mm.
the idea of waking up early in the morning to set aside time for yourself as a mom,
Yeah.
a partner or a wife, or even a single mom, that is
Mhm.
beneficial to have a time of day where your brain is rested. You can exercise, you can sit in silence or meditation. You can write out your goals for the day and set your intention. You can do affirmations to yourself of how much you're going to kill it. And
Hey.
when you get through that 1 to 2 hours, I promise you, you will feel unstoppable. Pouring into yourself at one of the best times in the day. So that's something that I like to do, is to just wake up and have that time to myself where no one is saying mommy or no one needs something,
Mhm.
to build yourself and whatever thing that you're working on.
Yes, that's true. So, I mean, you're boss for sure. How do you fit in your self-care? What's your go-to?
Nice. I'm just kidding. I will say, you know what I really truly do is I recognize moments where I feel overwhelmed and I stop what I'm doing.
Good.
Sometimes I'll be in the office and I'll have a tough encounter with a patient because it was emotionally withdrawing.
Mm.
Sometimes I'll play meditation. I'll just sit there for a couple of minutes, or I'll just step aside and take some deep breaths and take a moment, give myself the grace of having that time to just, that was
There
tough.
it is.
You know,
Yeah.
that was hard. Take a moment for you, I pray for that patient. I hope things will go well. Just taking that moment. So that's something I truly do.
Mhm.
Guys, it's something I enjoy doing that makes me help to reduce my stress level. And I
Mhm.
love to do. And I love to do things for myself too, whether it's shopping, retail therapy.
Retail therapy is real.
Be cautious if you're doing retail therapy when you're really stressed out.
Oh,
Like,
too much money.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. You might have quite a few new things to add to your closet. And then the typical girly things, whether it's facials, massages.
Oh,
Let me tell you another thing. Time with your girls.
oh my gosh. Girlfriend therapy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Time talking about it.
You can really let loose because we were talking about that. A friend of mine wrote a book, The Girlfriend Therapy. We're talking about like, why is being with your girl so much better? Because you really can let your shield down. Like when you're a parent, they need you, they pull from you. When you are a spouse, they pull from you. When you're at work, they pull from you. Your girls don't do that. Well, if you have some girls that do that, maybe you need to rethink your circle. But for the most part, they don't pull from you. You just let loose and you're vulnerable.
Yes, and that is a big part, I would say, of my self-care is I have a great group of friends that I call for different reasons, and they just pour into me, and
Yeah.
I remember breastfeeding. That was a challenge for me. And
Mhm.
I had a friend that would call me at like 2 o'clock in the morning. How's it going? How's it? You got
Aw.
this, you're leaders. That's awesome. I'm like, what? But it made me keep going. So girlfriend therapy is definitely a big part of my self-care.
Yes, that's huge. So taking a moment, self-grace, self-compassion, self-love, all the self stuff, self-care, and girlfriend therapy. Those are our pointers for sure. So I really appreciate you for being on the show, Dr. Sashana. Now you are on Journey to Joy Live, and I ask all my guests what your personal journey to joy has been like.
My personal journey to joy. I love that question because I think it's a perfect time for me to answer that question.
Mhm.
It has been through self-work,
Mm.
through therapy to understand things that the way I think, the way I do things, how to show up for myself,
Mhm.
to keep being unstoppable, how to get over my success guilt. Those are all
Mm.
with therapy for. It's not always about necessarily anxiety and depression. Sometimes it's challenges of being an immigrant and the burden that takes on you and caring for your entire family.
Mhm.
So my journey to joy has definitely been therapy has been a big part of it, working through the life things. Um, in addition to that is the recognition of self is a second big thing. And I would say the third one is I can't remember the author's name, but the book Untethered Soul changed my life. Because
Ah.
simple concept of it is going to be what it is. I don't control anything, I can just show up and do my very best, but accept the outcome, And so those are kind of my points of how I'm journeying
Acceptance.
to joy. Yeah.
Love it. Appreciate you so much. You can find her at the OB-GYN on TikTok.
Genie.
OB-GYN? Oh, is that how you pronounce it? That makes sense.
Yours.
I get it. That's so clever. Well, thank you so much for being on Journey to Joy Live. We appreciate you.
Yes, thank you. And I'll see you around.
This has been an NJoy Life production. If you're in a crisis, don't hesitate. Call, text, or chat 988 for immediate support. Please note, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional treatment. If you're looking for therapy or medication management through NJoy Life, visit www.drnjoylife.com to request a consultation. I accept Aetna for Georgia residents, and out-of-pocket services are available for others. I'm licensed in Georgia, Florida, Michigan, Tennessee, Maryland, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, Illinois, Virginia, and Minnesota. Be sure to grab your copy of the NJoy on Amazon for $39.08 to help you on your wellness journey. And remember, Journey to Joy Live is every Thursday at 7 p.m. Thank you for joining me. And until next time, may you continue to transform challenges into joy.